Today, we have clinical, quality, and regulatory affairs expert Krystal Santiago with us. As the founder of Santiago Engineers, Krystal has built a consulting business that focuses on helping medical device companies, from small startups to multinational corporations, navigate through their clinical, regulatory, and quality challenges. With her 20 years of growing expertise in the medical device field, she has pioneered early feasibility studies. She's an expert in early stage regulatory strategy and is a pragmatic strategist with novel device companies and pre-revenue startups. Now, I'd like to turn this over to my friend, Krystal Santiago.
Thanks, Trisha. Appreciate it. I think actually we covered this. I probably should have moved to that slide first, so my bad. But nice of everybody to join us over the Lunch and Learn. Thank you for being with us. We want to talk about today kind of keeping things simple when you're early stage. I've spent a decent amount of time with small startup companies and trying to figure out how to avoid potholes and making sure that they're not setting themselves up for compliance debt in the future. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and why you can make yourself basically a really complex problem if you're not careful, and trying to keep things simple is actually the easiest thing to do. So if we start from the beginning of this, right? Most small startups, which is what my focus is on this, most small startups are really heavily engineering driven. They're trying to get something to clinical study. They're trying to make sure that they have enough money to get there. They have milestones associated with the funding. And it can mean that if you're not careful about how you do design control, how you set up your system, they can spend more time on documentation than actually on innovation, which can be a huge trap for some of these companies. I have definitely been at companies where design reviews have taken 3 hours just because of the overhead in the process, making sure that they checked all the boxes on the compliance side to say that they had a process that they were following. It can take, 6 people to approve some simple changes because they've implemented document control systems that are too large for where their organization is. And what the output of that is, that I've seen in multiple places, and including some of my current clients, the team starts creating the shadow system because they don't want to deal with the quality system. And that's where you end up with this large amount of what I call compliance debt. So if your system isn't scalable, isn't something that engineers can follow in a decent amount of time, they're going to create their own system, and you're going to end up getting in trouble during audits. And this is pretty frequent, to be honest, or it comes up during due diligence when you're trying to sell your company, that you've created all of this compliance debt that can't actually be bought back in a reasonable amount of time. One of my, I'd say, on-brand things is that I think the QMS needs to be innovative. I like really pragmatic solutions. I like simple solutions that are easy to follow. And to be really honest, if your quality system is telling everybody how they have to develop a product, it's probably overspecified. Like if you think about early stage products, taking even 510K products to market, like, you're exempt from a lot of things until you actually hit commercial go, right? So if you think about I'll make up something on a class 3 device, you have to go do a clinical study. Investigational device exemption means you are exempt from everything except for design control, which means that you need to put your time and effort where it needs to go and not necessarily in upholding a very complex system. So we just want to make sure that we're careful with that. We want to make sure that we're right-sizing it for what we need to do, and that we're not creating a place where it's too chaotic that your staff can't follow it, and creating this debt that you can't get out of when you do have to go get 1345 certified, when you do have to have the FDA come in for pre-market audits and things like that. So when we talk about being pragmatic, I kind of want to talk about 5 different core elements here. And I guess we'll spend most of the time here for folks. Design control should scale. You really need to be able to evolve. So when you start out, you need to have your design project approved. It doesn't need to be a dissertation. It doesn't have to include absolutely every what if. It doesn't have to include 15 different people signing off. You probably don't have marketing sign off. You probably have a CEO and an engineer that are trying to do something on a napkin. And if they're smart, they hired their quality person early enough that they can put the system in place, right? So this is the backbone of your entire product and project, right? Is having good design controls. One of the traditional mistakes that we see people make is they have worked at a very large company. And maybe, you know, nobody does this, but maybe they pilfered some procedures on their way out. Or maybe they bought a quality system from one of those large companies, maybe one that starts with green and ends with guru, or maybe one that also comes with canned quality systems. And so they'll give you procedures, which is great, and some of them are scaled appropriately. But if they're not, you're just releasing something to release something. So you could have something that's got a lot of different design control steps that have to do with hardware rather than software. And maybe you're a software company, or maybe you're a hardware company and you don't need anything software, but you've got a procedure for software because that's what came from the company that you used. So you gotta be really careful about that. That just adds layers of complexity that you don't need, and you won't have any evidence of compliance to if you're not careful. I actually have a client right now that bought one of those systems that came with a canned quality system. They implemented all of it, including management review. They have 5 people. They all sit in like a very small office. They probably don't need management review at this point. We're not treating patients. We're not commercial, but we are trying to get a device to an early feasibility study. So why would I want to do management review every year for something that I don't think I need yet, right? So be really pragmatic. Do one-page design plans. Just keep it simple so people can follow it. Make sure that it's very iterative so that you don't feel like you're dying on that hill for the first iteration to be perfect. Like, just make it super easy to make iterations along the way and make it better. Make sure you document decisions. Make sure you have good design requirements, those types of things. Spend your effort there so that you can have a good product that comes out rather than on the overhead associated with a fully compliant system. The other thing that I see that I'm going to take a step over to is document control. So when I release a quality system for early stage, I release design control, document control, training, and change management. Those are the ones that I release first off, right? Document control can go horribly wrong, especially since most startups are not going into an EQMS. There's some out there that are actually reasonably priced for the record now. So like I use QuickVault and I love it. It is early stage, $500 to $1,000 a month. It's not very expensive. Whereas you have other larger systems that can cost you like tens of thousands of dollars a year. And nobody wants to spend that on it, spend money on that in something where you're diving for dollars in the couch cushion in between, animal studies because you've got to define what your product is. So you want to make it super easy. We want to make sure that you don't have to log into 3 different places in order to go get the information you need. You need to make sure that you haven't created this complexity with folder levels. So I'm assuming that you have a electronic paper-based system, which is where we scan things in or where we release electronic things and we put them in vaults and folder structures. If you got to click 42 times to get to a document, it takes too long. You got to remember where it is. Nobody's going to use it. You got to make sure that your approval matrix is easy. If you've got to go get a whole bunch of people, including consultants, if you have to get their signature on everything, you're slowing down your system. I'm not saying don't use your consultants, but I'm saying maybe you don't need your clinical consultant every time you want to revise something. So be smart about it. Make sure that the versions are easy to identify. It really just allows people to get to things quicker, which means that they're more likely to use it, which means that you're less likely to have somebody tell you, I didn't know, right? Like they did the training and then they forgot actually where it's supposed to be, right? That happens a lot. We're moving quick. We're moving through with as little overhead as possible. People are going to shortcut that if it's not super simple for them, right? One of the things on the implementation that I found super helpful, pick colors. Like, so if you're in a Google Drive, color your folders. Let people know that the green folder is the approved one, the released one, the gray one is the archived one. Like, you process colors super quickly as compared to the actual words. If you've ever seen people do those fun tests where they're trying to mess you up by writing the word in a different color than what it is, it's because you process colors that much more quickly. So do a little poke-a-yoke, like make it easy for people to find the folder that they need to get into, right? Moving on to CAPA, I feel like CAPA is where most people get in trouble, for the record. I have worked at a lot of companies and I'm a lot of years old and we won't discuss that, but virtually every company that I've ever worked on on the face of the planet has had problems in their CAPA system. And the problem with their CAPA system is not that they have a system, it's that they've written requirements that they can't achieve. So most of the time, the audit findings that I see here are, you wrote that you have a 14-day window to do the root cause analysis and you took 6 months. You wrote that you have to use the 5 whys and you did a fishbone. It's a procedure that you can complicate significantly because everybody wants to make it look like a very fancy thing and that everybody has it on lock and that they know what they're doing. CAPA really means you figured out what the problem was, you contained it, you corrected it, and in some cases you prevented it in other systems. Like, you can do that on 2 pages. You may not be able to if it's a very large, complex process, but you can do that in a very simple way, and you'll get more buy-off from auditors that way than you will if you write a dissertation on something that they can't follow, right? So make sure you cover what happened, why it happened, and how we prevent it. I've actually had cases of this. I'll give you a real life example. A software bug caused a device to crash during a clinical study. There's a bug in the error handling routine. It wasn't caught. Why wasn't it caught? Well, we only test the happy path scenarios. Like, they didn't have the full testing suite that they needed to have. They didn't test for vulnerabilities and making sure that the device, if it's going to fail, it fails in a safe way. So now you have to do a corrective action for that, right? You add error conditioning, you add, you have to go back and you have to reveal your existing protocols. Like, those are very simple things that you can cover in a couple of pages. And if you can simplify it a little bit more, you'll get more buy-in in the process rather than continuing to push back on engineers that probably don't love CAPAs in the first place. I don't know anybody that gets real excited when they get a CAPA assigned to them, but if you make it more arduous, they're less likely to follow the process. Okay. These are the last 2 that I want to cover, I think. So risk management is by far the most important thing that any company on the planet does. And I will die on that hill. You can make it as simple, like, yes, we have to adhere to 14971, but when you're thinking about it in live, in a situation, what could go wrong with the design? How likely is it and how bad would it be? And what are we doing to prevent it or mitigate it? Those are really 3 simple questions that you ask while you're in design. I know that we still need to have all the deliverables. I know that we need to have the evidence of a user file and a user risk analysis and a hazard analysis and a design. Like, there's a lot of documentation deliverables here, but what I see a lot is people worried about the deliverables and not necessarily the process. So risk management as a process is really just meant to be, let's ask questions like this along the way, and let's have really good answers for this stuff, because it'll make the documentation easier, but it'll make a better product, right? So if you think about it in that framework and you integrate it into your design control process and not just think about it as a deliverable that everybody hates doing and doesn't want to be locked in a conference room for 3 weeks to do the hazard assessment, doesn't want to have to go get the clinical signature on it and all of that fun stuff. If you think about it in that framework, it becomes really powerful. And then I save Supplier for last, and then we can take any questions because I know we're trying to be mindful of people's times. Supplier is another really sensitive subject. I will say a lot of folks get written up for suppliers. I think you can do this and scale it appropriately. When you're super early on and you are in design control, you're technically not required to have full supplier controls, right? Like, it's good practice. You probably want to take a look. You probably want to have some basic requirements. You're probably going to really rely on somebody having certification themselves, because if you take somebody's product out of their garage in Vegas, they don't have a quality system, which means that you're responsible for all of it. And that's a lot to take on as a small company. So at least maintain an approved supplier list, at least have a basic supplier profile that you fill out and a survey and a no change agreement, so that you've got something to say that you did your due diligence. As you start to scale and start to buy more, you're going to add performance metrics so that you can have that feedback loop on how your suppliers are doing. And then even more as you scale and you get larger and you have more resources, like add the auditing. Like, you're going to audit all the way back in stage 1 for things that you have to outsource that are critical. So sterilization suppliers you're auditing. If somebody's your contract manufacturer, you're auditing them at stage 1. But you're not going to audit everybody. You're going to be smart about it when you're smaller so that you can get the resources that you need, but your auditing requirements are going to scale as you get bigger and as you add more complexity and more risk into the system, right? So when you get bigger and you hit scale, typically you're going to want to pick new suppliers. You're going to have auditing and formal agreements, because the suppliers that are cheaper are probably going to be ones that you have to go, stick your nose in to make sure that they're giving you good product. So make sure you don't start out with, I'm auditing all my suppliers every year. I'm making sure that they've all signed all of these agreements, because you won't get that necessarily when you're super early on. Hopefully that makes sense. Oops. All right. I think you guys have heard me ad nauseum say simple systems. Keep it simple. Make sure that you can scale. But that was basically the point of the whole presentation. Like, there's ways to scale things that you need to have as a deliverable. But if you make it too complex, people aren't going to follow the system, and you are really just pulling that compliance debt into a commercial setting that will get you in trouble. And I've seen it happen at a ton of companies that I've been a part of when I was a more junior engineer, companies now that, to be really honest, they pay me a lot of money to go in and fix it after they've done this, and it's not fun. I'm sure that Square One, Trish has probably got a ton of stories in this space, because this is exactly what happens. We create all this debt that has to be paid off at some point, and it's not always a pleasant process.